Hello everyone, this is your friend Naruto Nexus 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Trained by Jiraya Summon for Chunin Exams Naruto Harem Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this and comment for next part. And now let's start the fanfic. Toads. The small creature that had just appeared in a cloud of smoke gave what counted as a proud ribbit. Behind the amphibian, Jiraiya beamed. Pretty sweet, huh? The boy's brow furrowed, his gaze darting between the tiny creature and its summoner in a mixture of focus and confusion. Jiraiya didn't seem to mind the pause. It was important to let the audience soak in the art, after all. Eventually, when clarity finally breached through their consciousness, they would follow their heart and shout out their praises like. That's it. Jiraiya blinked. Were he a lesser man, such criticism could have cast a dark pall over his features. But he was Jiraiya of the Sannin, renowned toad sage, high priest of Mount Myoboku, defender of fair maiden from Hai no Kuni to the deserts of Suna. He would not be so easily derailed by the gripes of a lone critic. Greatness, as he had learned over many decades of adventures, was rarely appreciated by the common rabble. Sometimes, you had to sell it. That's it. The toad sage boomed. That's it. Kid. Summoning jutsu are some of the rarest, most powerful jutsu around. A contract with a summoning animal is something Chunin and Junin would kill for the opportunity to obtain. And to have a contract with the legendary toad clans of Mount Myoboku. Worth its weight in gold and then all the jewels in a daimyo's court. Shinobi nations have gone to war over much lesser contracts. The boy's eyes widened slightly, and Jiraiya smirked. His words were breaking through whatever wall of ignorance had blockaded the boy's skull. The next words out of his mouth were surely bound to be amazement and wonder. I mean, the boy said slowly, squinting as he examined the animal more closely. What can they do? For the briefest of moments, Jiraiya scowled. In a poof, the toad disappeared and Jiraiya stepped in through the smoke, laughing lively and hoisting his arms out wide. What can they do? He bellowed, sharing an incredulous look with the invisible audience surrounding them. Kid, the Toad clan are the most dynamic fighters in the shinobi world. Fighting, brawling, espionage, drinking. You name it, and these toads can handle it. The boy tilted his head slightly with a distant look. Will it help me fight Neji? Inwardly, Jiraiya groaned. Leave it to a genin to be given the key to a mansion only to ask where the bathroom was. Neji. Brat, if you were up against a whole legion of enemy ninja, there's not a single technique in the world that would serve you better than Kuchio's no jutsu. Hook, line, sinker. Jiraiya patted himself on the back for his showmanship. The kid had been much more difficult than he'd anticipated, but the Legion line was inspired, if he did say so himself. He could already see the small sparkle glinting in the boy's eye. Visions of a lone, blonde shinobi standing before an approaching enemy army, a Hokage's cloak billowing dramatically in the winds of war. Despite uncountable odds, in the flash of hand signs, a matching army of massive toads descended on the battlefield, cutting clear through the enemy ranks. Give or take a few details, of course, but Jiraiya could vividly remember having the same daydream when first offered the scroll. The boy opened his mouth, and Jiraiya closed his eyes with a smirk, calmly awaiting whatever jubilant enthusiasm was sure to come. The boy stammered, suddenly looking down and shifting nervously. I don't know. Jiraiya blinked again. He said slowly, as if unsure what the boy had even responded, don't know. At the confusion in the sage's voice, the blonde suddenly jolted up straight, his face awash in embarrassment as frantically waving his hands in apology. No, he stammered, uncharacteristically apologetic. I mean, this jutsu sounds freaking awesome. And you didn't have to offer to teach it to me and it's really awesome that you did and I'm very grateful but. Jiraiya leveled a small glare, tilting his head back slightly. I'm offering you a summoning scroll. Once in a lifetime here, brat. How is there a but? He could literally hear the rust on gears as they churned desperately in the boy's mind. Well, the genin nervously offered. Well, you said it could take out whole bunches of enemy ninja, but you didn't say how it fights against just one enemy. Jiraya's glare relaxed, but he raised an eyebrow. Like, what do you even do if you just want to take out one guy? The blonde continued, staring intently into his hands so as to not have to look at the white-haired man. Just summon some huge frog and make it fall on them. Jiraya's immediate reflex was designed to respond on 2 points. 1. Just to reiterate and make sure the boy was aware while offering enough sarcasm to adequately convey that it was absolutely ridiculous for a genin to be turning down a summoning contract. Seriously. Ridiculous. He'd heard the kid was a little thick but, sheesh. And, 2, of course, to explain that summoning a toad on top of someone was completely an acceptable plan of Ada. Jiraya paused. Wasn't it? Jiraya had summoned toads on plenty of his enemies. It was easily one of his favorite uses for his amphibious warriors. That said, the more he thought on the boy's question, the more he began to doubt the effectiveness of squishing your enemies beneath a mountain of summons. Gravity was a deadly weapon, but such skills took more spatial awareness and timing than he was sure the boy was capable of. Jiraiya recalled more than one small residence that had accidentally become the victim of such a move in his earlier years. What's more, however, Jiraiya was forced to re-examine the effectiveness of a summon in 1 versus 1 situations. While many of the larger toads were far more suited for mass fighting scenarios, there were plenty of smaller, more specialized members of the clan that could easily be offistants in close quarters combat. That effectiveness, however, was entirely dependent on having a mutual bond of respect and trust with the toad. Effective combat with one of the smaller toads took coordination built up over hundreds of hours of joint training and at least a dozen broken bones. Aka. Longer than the month the boy had. The blonde, nervously shooting glances at the pensive look that had fallen over his new teacher's face, felt a new wave of guilt wash over him. I'm sorry, he blurted, kicking himself for his own stubbornness. I don't mean to turn down your offer, it's really very kind of you, mister. It's just Naruto. The boy immediately fell silent, nervously looking up to meet Jiraya's face. Stop apologizing, he said, more softly this time as he examined how upset the young boy had become worrying about being ungrateful. Slowly, Jiraiya wandered over to the bank of a nearby stream and sat by its waters, motioning for the boy to follow him. I'm not mad. Naruto's head whipped around, hesitation now mixed with the smallest sliver of hope. You're not. Jiraiya shook his head, leaning back on his hands and giving a small laugh. No, I'm not. You're still an idiot for not taking me up on my offer, but, well, I'm not sure your reasoning is off. Naruto looked like he had something to say in response to that, but seemed to shake his head before turning his gaze back to the stream. However, Jiraiya continued, in my great, sage-like wisdom, I'm wondering what the hell has caused such a drastic switch to logic from the entirety of your other behavior today. At that, Naruto at least had the decency to look slightly ashamed. Ah, he replied nervously, well, you just were describing the technique really dramatically, and it suddenly started to sound like how Kakashi-sensei described that closet pervert Ebisu he tried to pawn me off to. The blonde trailed off, but Jiraya's features hardened and the Sannin was suddenly filled with the urge to summon a toad on a certain Chunin. Not a big one, really. Definitely a medium to heavy-sized one, though. Pawned you off, did he? Yeah, the boy said with a sigh, his head slumping uncharacteristically. I mean, I get that he's gotta teach that bastard something to fight the sand freak. Some wild and crazy jutsu, or whatever, but I've been thinking about it more all day and I guess it just sort of got to me. Hold on, Jiraiya interrupted in confusion. Bastard. You mean the Uchiha kid? Naruto nodded solemnly, a small sneer crossing his lips. Yeah, his stupid Sharingan means he can learn whatever super awesome technique Kakashi-sensei is gonna teach him instantly. And Neji's got that crazy eye taijutsu that he gets from his family, and it's just. Naruto trailed off, but a deep frown had already settled across Jiraya's face as the sun set in the distance. I feel like everyone's just had all these cool moves and secret techniques just given to them growing up, and I'm just left picking up the scraps or stealing something. Naruto, having seemingly voiced the weighing angst in his body, leaned back on the river, resting his hands behind his head and stared up at the sky. Jiraya's expression remained unchanging, but his eyes grew distant and guilty. And then, he had an idea. A stupid, reckless, ridiculous idea. One for the record books, really. He'd had ideas before. Never as brilliant as the gifted Tsunades or the also gifted but super creepy Orochimarus, but still, ideas. Some of them even worked. But this one had everything. Drama, intrigue, action. Horribly reckless. Probably. Potentially a spark for international conflict. The chance was pretty small, but definitely non-zero. Would it fix the guilty, godparent-sized hole he didn't know he had that had suddenly appeared in his stomach and in his insides? Well, that he'd just have to see. But, never one to get worked up because being a cool master ninja took constant effort, Jiraiya leaned back casually and turned his head towards the blonde. So, he said lazily. You want to learn something cool? Naruto nodded, blue eyes longingly watching the crimson evening clouds soar through the sky. I wanna learn something that, when every other ninja sees it, they almost crap their pants in fear. I wanna learn something that bastard, Sasuke, can't steal from me and that will knock the pants of these stupid judges. The sage nodded as the boy described his wish list with a knowing grin. Well, that would definitely work. But, the whims of a 13-year-old were hardly enough to justify this idea. He needed at least something a little more justifiable than a view that essentially boiled down to, notice me, I'm a good ninja. If you found a jutsu, Jiraiya continued, something that fit all of those categories. Jiraiya tilted his head towards the boy and let his voice take a more serious tone. What would you do with it? I'd use it like I use every other jutsu I know. The blonde replied back without a moment's hesitation. Whatever helps me become strong so I can be the Hokage and protect my precious people. And suddenly, Naruto's whisker marks faded away, and it wasn't Naruto lying next to him. The new man had the same neon blonde hair and the same blue eyes. There was a goofy, lopsided smile on his face. Believe it. Like a lightning bolt, Jiraiya shot to his feet. Kid, Jiraiya declared, a smug smirk sneaking across his lips as he rounded on the startled boy. Meet me here tomorrow morning at the crack of dawn. That early, Naruto shot back, utterly confused at the sudden burst of movement. What for? If at all possible, Jiraiya's grin got even wider. I've got something I think you'll want to learn. These seats had better be good, forehead. From her spot, Sakura bristled, but remained zen. The seats were good, after all. She'd shown up nearly 3 hours early to ensure they'd all gotten a front row seat to Sasuke-kun's fight. As if she'd sit in the nosebleed for such an event. As if, pig, Sakura said, finally, moving aside and patting the seat next to her that she had saved for her best frenemy. Where's Choji and Shikamaru? I thought they were coming with you. Ino rolled her eyes with a huff. I told Shika to make sure Choji left some food at the concession stand for the rest of the audience before he went to get warmed up. Sakura gave a small gasp and stared at her friend slack-jawed. Ino, she exclaimed, scandalized. You can't say that about your teammate. For a moment, Ino was confused at the sudden accusation, but her face suddenly became gravely serious. I'm not joking. Sakura blinked, unsure of how exactly to handle such a statement, but was saved from her confusion by the arrival of most of Team 8. Yo, Sakura, Ino, barked Kiba, sliding into 2 seats in front of the girls and slinging his feet up on the railing. Thanks for saving us such rocking seats. Hinata, taking great care to only occupy the space of 1 seat, gave a small bow in appreciation to the Team 7 matriarch. Why yes. She stammered quietly. Thank you Sakura-san. Oh. Sakura laughed, waving away their gratitude. It was nothing. I'm just happy we all get to sit together. For sure. Kiba nodded, a feral grin stretching across his lips. And hopefully watch our teammates kick some foreign ninja as, ow. Damn it woman. Causally, Ino unrolled the fight bill she had turned into an impromptu mace and leaned back into her seat. Those, foreign ninja, are sitting right behind us, dog brains. Who cares? Kiba countered, though noticeably quieter than before. My boy Shino is gonna kick some major. While I'm sure, Ino challenged, leaning back and checking her nails to accentuate her condescension, that Shino had prepared far more thoroughly than you would have, dog breath. The blonde chose to make a dramatic pause for the sole purpose of basking in the low, growling noise coming from the Inuzuka before continuing. But, she finished with a matter-of-fact tone, Shika's been training with Asuma sensei all month. And he's even been awake for it all. I'd say he's got this tournament on lock. The implications of a conscious Nara were lost on no one. It was one of their generation's open secrets, much to the confusion of their academy teachers, but each and every student, when asked who the smartest in the class was, would point straight at the usually sleeping scion of the Nara class. For Shikamaru to actually be awake and actively interested in training would be very, very troublesome for his opponent. More interesting to Sakura, however, than Shikamaru's sudden deviation from narcolepsy was the almost proud inflection in Ino's voice as she described the teammate. The same teammate who, just months before afternoons, Ino had spent over an hour venting to Sakura, finding new and creative combination of the words, shit, lazy, and asshole. Well, Kakashi-sensei has been training Sasuke-kun all month, too. Sakura countered, never one to let Ino have the last laugh. He's been showing him his elite, signature jutsu, so I don't think anyone else stands a chance. From his seat, Kiba suddenly staggered, his hands flying to the side of his face with a dramatic gasp. What? He whispered, turning to the others bewildered. Sakura thinks that Sasuke is going to win something. I am shocked, I tell you. Sakura's fist was already posed to strike, but Ino's rolled up fight bill beat her to the punch, whacking the Inuzuka upside the head. Don't be a jackass, mutt. Ino glared, she's allowed to root for her teammates. Kiba rolled his eyes, waving his chastisement away with a dismissive hand. Please, he shot back. Then let's hear her support her other teammate. You, no, the one who barely got by me to be here. Sakura blinked. Yeah, Sakura-san, Choji smacked, suddenly entering the conversation only after fisting another handful of popcorn into his mouth. What about Naruto? Sakura blinked again, confused. What about Naruto? It was only as the blank stares of her classmates met her own that Sakura came to the sudden and startling conclusion that she had completely forgotten about the blonde idiot. Kiba, always the first to comment, slapped a hand to his face with a sigh. Unbelievable. He muttered, I mean, I know he's dead last and all, but sheesh. Get out of Sasuke's butt for like 2 seconds, would ya? No. Sakura shot back, rolling onto the defensive. I don't know where he is. I haven't seen him in a month. Ino gave the girl a look that made Sakura feel like she'd rather be hiding under her covers at home. You mean to tell me that you, his teammate and general center of orbit, haven't heard a peep from the single loudest ninja in the history of ninja? Well, it sounded stupid when you said it like that. No, I know. But she didn't know. She honestly had no idea where the boy had been or who he had been training, but she suddenly felt absolutely awful for not knowing. Idiot or not, Naruto was her teammate. Of course, she wanted him to do well. He didn't come to our training ground. Sakura felt her stomach churn at how pitiful of an excuse that was. And you didn't wonder where he had been. Sakura didn't even register who had asked her, as suddenly the arena PA system burst to life. Lord Hokage. Fighting annoyance from his face, Sarutobi turned to the veiled Cage with a well-practiced, welcoming smile. Yes, Lord Cage, your village is quite lovely. This arena is truly something to remember for a lifetime. Outwardly, the aged Cage's lips drew into a gracious smile. He even complimented the gesture with a small nod from his seat. I thank you, Lord Cage. Many people, great individuals, work tirelessly at its upkeep. Inwardly, the Sandame bit down a sneer. He was already on edge with his wayward student running rampant through the examination. The last thing he needed was to be hounded with asinine questions by an overbearing foreign leader. What's more, the Cage was different than the last he had met. The man. Less hardline autocrat, more creepy movie villain, his Anbu had confided to him after surveilling the man for hours. Sarutobi sighed, as if he needed more stress at his age. And for the opening match of these CHUNIN exam finals, please welcome Hyuga Neji to Arena Center. Joining Neji for his final preparations is his squad leader, Maeda Guy of Konohagakure. The arena erupted into a raucous applause. Hyuga were always a crowd favorite in home exams. The clan usually shelled out thousands to reserve prime seats for all its members, main house and branch. Even at CHUNIN level, the opportunity to witness the legendary Byakugan was a treat in and of itself. I have heard much of this boy's master. The Cage's gravel voice seemed to hiss. He must have trained a truly formidable student. Sarutobi nodded firmly. At least this was conversation about the task at hand, for once. Maeda Guy is one of Konoha's foremost taijutsu experts. Young Neji is extremely capable for a shinobi his age. The Cage chuckled behind his veil, his eyes locked on the arena. Then let us hope his challenge is up to the task. And now, facing Hyuga Neji in round 1, please welcome Uzumaki Naruto to the arena. For a moment, the arena was silent, and the Hokage felt his heart clench in his chest. But then, he heard it. Slower, and definitely less enthusiastic than for the first combatant, Sarutobi was unable to fight a proud smile that stretched across his face as the crowd gave a Konoha shinobi support. It had seemed that things might finally be looking up for TH. There was a sudden surge of static, and the announcer burst back over the PA. Assisting his apprentice in his final preparations is Lord Jiraya of the CHUNIN. The moderate applause that had filled the arena went silent, and Sarutobi lurched in his chair. Lord Hokage, the Cage said urgently, his voice alarmed. I was not told Lord Jiraiya would be in attendance. You were not told, Lord Cage. The elder Cage grit out tersely, his eyes narrowing at this sudden surprise. Because I was not aware of this sudden development. From the arena, both men watched as a tuft of neon blonde hair entered the arena shadowed by a long, white mane. The two exchanged a hushed conversation, the crowd noise offering no obstacle to communication because the arena remained in a stunned silence. The sage tousled the blonde's hair and Sarutobi watched as his former student dashed away, narrowly avoiding an embarrassed left hook from the boy. Sarutobi closed his eyes, searching desperately for his center. Student mine, he growled internally, I swear if you've done something stupid I will. Sensei. Both Cages turned to find a beaming Jiraiya casually making his way down the balcony towards their section, almost skipping as he approached. Lord Cage, the CHUNIN said with a reverent bow as he approached. I apologize for the intrusion. I hope I am not disturbing you. The Cage nodded slowly in response, hesitating for a moment before acknowledging the greeting. Jiraiya of the CHUNIN, the veiled man replied. To what do we owe this honor? I was unaware you would be in the city. Jiraiya gave a shrug and a small laugh at his own machinations. Well, I put in a lot of effort on my new apprentice, already. Figured I'd come and see if he was worth it. Sarutobi had a vivid fantasy of him smashing his chair over his student's head, but managed to brush it aside. Just barely. Jiraiya-kun, the Hokage said, his voice grandfatherly and warm. What a wonderful surprise. We have so much to discuss. Sarutobi forced himself to smile at his words, barely restraining his urge to knock his former pupil upside the head. But, first, are my ears deceiving me? Are you substituting in for Hataki-san at present or? Nah. Jiraiya waved his hand dismissively as he walked around next to his teacher. Just sent you the paperwork yesterday. I took on a new apprentice. Teacher and student's eyes met, and a silent battle flared to life. Did you now? The sage nodded. Yep. And let me tell you, sensei. I think this one's a winner. You've taken Naruto-kun. Yep. As an apprentice. Jiraiya lazily scratched his head with a yawn. No shortage of paperwork to take him off the roster, but I bet you'll see it on your desk tomorrow. Sarutobi's hands wrapped around the ends of his chair and the wood began to whine under the pressure. Since when did you decide on this arrangement? Last month. There were no words that the Hokage wanted to say that were appropriate for current company. Or even private company, for that matter. And what? He trailed off, his voice wavering slightly as a small crack began to spider web down the arm of his chair. Pray tell, have you been teaching young Naruto-kun over the past month? At this, Jiraiya leaned back and gave a nervous laugh. You know, he said, leaning closer to the Hokage's chair. That is actually something I'd like to talk to you about. The arena was bigger on the inside. Sure, it had looked huge as they had walked inside. The story's tall stone structure stuck out like a sore thumb against the Konoha skyline. Massive as the Colosseum may have looked on the outside, the moment you stepped in the center. Neji scoffed as he watched the blonde boy gaze around like an idiot. Are you going to continue gawking like a fool? The Hyuga taunted, or were we going to fight? Naruto snorted as he swung his arms in a cross-body stretch. Well, he shot back brightly. Picking up being a douche right where you left off, huh? Vulgarities. Neji spat, shifting into a stance. I should expect nothing less from trash like you. Easy there, tough guy. Naruto replied with a smirk. Won't look good when trash knocks your teeth in. Neji's face remained undisturbed, but the sudden tensing of his stance let Naruto know that the sentiment had been received. Proctor. The Hyuga demanded. May I begin? From his spot nearby, Hayate gave a tired sigh. Why were the genin always such drama queens? Not yet, he commanded, chewing idly on his pick. I haven't gotten the signal. You two keep insulting each other or whatever makes you feel special inside. As much as he resented the flippant response, Neji resolved that goading his opponent was, if nothing else, cathartic. It is your destiny to lose this battle. He declared to the blonde. Even if you are now the student of a Chunin. It has been decided from the moment you were doomed to face me. Naruto, who had been mid-stretch on his calves, groaned. Oh, for crying out loud. He replied, rolling his eyes. You're still on this bullshit. You are a failure. You will suffer the fate of all failure. Oh, yeah, the blonde whispered, his eyes narrowing as he sank into a battle stance. I've seen what you think of failures. Neji smirked, vindicated in hitting a nerve. You are as foolish as she is. Am I? Naruto shot back, matching Neji's pacing around Hayate as the Chunin raised his hand in preparation to start the match. Or maybe we're both onto something. Neji let loose a dark, mocking laugh. Your delusion is truly pitiful. And the stick stuck up Yori's really annoying. Hayate's hand fell, and Neji surged forward in a rage, his open palm slamming into Naruto's chest and sending the boy hurtling back. The blonde had only just managed to right himself when he gave a yelp, diving to the side as he dodged a second barrage of attacks. What's wrong? Dead last. Neji shouted as he relentlessly pursued the blonde across the battlefield, his missed strikes leaving small craters in the ground. Where has your bravado gone? Kujibushin. There was an audible gasp in the arena as one genin became 10, but Neji remained nonplussed. Clones. He scoffed, blood surging around his eyes as the Byakugan flared to life. You think to run from the all-seeing eye of fate with clones. 3 of the clones, forming a triangle formation, charged at the Hyuga. The first punch struck air as Neji effortlessly twisted his body out of the path of the strike, slamming his palms into the guts of two attackers. The third, however, hit its mark. A chakra-infused haymaker made contact with Neji's jaw and the Hyuga was tossed like a rag doll to the side. Solid clones, the Hyuga muttered, climbing back to his feet and shifting his stance yet again. Unexpected. Neji's eyes narrowed, his pale white orbs seeing all. But it won't save you. The remaining 7 clones charged and there was a flurry of limbs followed by 6 puffs of smoke. Only one of the Narutos didn't disappear, and that one was sent sprawling to the ground with a thud and a worrisome cracking noise. Worthless, Neji said evenly, slowly striding across the arena while Naruto struggled to his feet. A loser like you never stood a chance against my might. Squirm as much as you please, worm, but you will never be able to change what you are. Destiny has already decided your fate. Neji saw the boy heave deeply, and he smirked. Crying, what a disgrace of a nin. Laughing. From his spot on the ground, shakily rising back to his feet, the sound escaping from the blonde wasn't of surrender, but like the funniest joke he'd ever heard had just been whispered into his ear. Neji saw red. You dare, he roared, engorged veins throbbing around his eyes. The blonde, through fits of giggles, tried unsuccessfully to rein himself in, weakly holding up a hand. He stammered between spurts, whipping his eyes of tears. I mean, you're just fitting this mold so perfectly it hurts. This is exactly like Ero Sennin said it would go down. Neji froze, despite his overwhelming urge to juken the blonde into a wall. You what? But Naruto could barely focus, the situation was just too funny to him. You're trash. The blonde growled, air quotes following his words. You can't beat me because fate. Blah, blah, blah. Monologo. Monolu. Monoli. Neji maintained his glare as the blonde seemed to trail off whispering to himself. From up in the stands, Jiraya slapped a hand to his face, mortified. Monologue. Oh, that's it. Monologue. Neji's face held unbridled rage as he slipped once more into his stance. I was going to allow you to surrender once you were beaten. The Hyuga growled. But now, I'm going to beat you into unconsciousness. Naruto, seemingly recovering from his forgetfulness, replied with a smirk as his hand reached into his back pocket. Chose your final words carefully, dead last. The blonde grinned. You know the problem with spending your life looking up for your destiny written in the stars. Naruto pulled out a single, 3-pronged kunai and focused intently on a toss as Neji charged. As losers will walk right by you. With fluid ease, the Hyuga shifted just centimeters to the left, allowing the kunai to pass harmlessly past him as he surged forward, hands blazing with chakra. His eyes narrowed in, looking to engrave the blonde's helpless look forever in his memory. But Naruto smirked. And then there was a brilliant yellow flash. For a moment, everything was perfect. Sunlight, late summer gold across the field like warm rain. Wind rustled the land and the nearby trees, branches swaying in tune to the melody of the forest. Serene. Meditative. A perfect Zen space where. HLLP. Jiraya's face contorted, eyes straining to close even deeper. Deep breaths, in and out, as he returned to the garden of the serenity in his mind. The noise faded, and the low rustle of the leaves returned. The sun's dull heat flushed across his face. He was here, and here was he. One with the grass and the ground. Nature breathing in, his own body breathing out in a perfect cycle of. Sensei. Jiraiya closed his eyes harder. More peace. More serenity. Sensei. I think. The voice said. It was so loud. The leaves felt distant. Jiraiya was fighting with every ounce of discipline he had. His own cells screaming peace against the wave of distraction that only sought to distance him from the serenity of the Magana hurl. Naruto clenched, a dry squelch squishing into his throat. The zen was gone, and Jiraiya's fingers snapped up and pointed away into the woods. That way, he ordered. If you're going to lose your stomach, again, you do it that way. The blonde's body trembled and swirled in a scramble for the tree line. He made it 4 or 5 shuffles before being overcome. Bieg. It was much worse, Jiraya decided, now that the boy was only dry heaving into the ground. He'd lost any actual sustenance stored in his stomach hours ago. The sound without the event was more grating on his ears than the actual vomit. Naruto began, attempting to re-find his footing. I just can't get over the twist. Every time I jump my whole body just feels so wrong. You're summoning yourself, kid. Jiraiya said, forcing his mind back from the display. You've got to get used to relaxing your notion of spatial positioning. Spatial? Naruto squinted. Spatial what? What Jiraiya wanted to do was turn and walk away right there. Or scream. Maybe both. Now, however, he just gave a slow and measured nod. 3 weeks of disappointment had tapered his expectations, somewhat, and he was able to keep the totality of his disappointment bottled up inside. Listen, he answered, reaching to his right and plucking a single leaf from a fallen branch. I need you to be like this leaf when you think about where you are. Naruto appraised the leaf with the same expression that children have when listening to business talk or advanced number theory. Huh, was the response. I don't get it. You can't stop, Jiraiya, the sage growled in his mind. Remember, keep the disappointment inside. Remember why you're doing this, Jiraiya. You made a decision, a commitment. The sage exhaled and spoke. I know, he said. I know you don't get it. But do your best to follow here. See this leaf? A nod, blue eyes trained like a simple-minded hawk onto the greenery. Okay, so this leaf is, right now, in my hand. Naruto double-checked the leaf was, in fact, still in Jiraiya's hand. It was. He nodded. Yes. The bar had been lowered so much, Jiraiya found himself pleased with the smallest of victories. Okay. So watch what happens. Without a sound, Jiraiya let go of the leaf's stem. Flittering in the afternoon wind, it drifted down and down and down before crashing silent against the grass. Naruto's eyes followed it the whole way, unblinking. Okay. Jiraiya spoke again. Where is the leaf, now? Naruto blinked. Twice. Thrice. On the hesitation. Uncertainty. On the ground. Without a word, the sage bent down and plucked the leaf up, returning it to the palm of his hand. And now, back in your, Naruto answered slow. Hand. This isn't a trick question. Jiraiya. I had the leaf in my hand, and then I dropped it. The leaf was on the ground, and then I picked it up and put it back in my hand. Now, the sage continued, here's the real question, did the leaf think about where it was? Quote, quote. Quote, quote. The leaf. Yes. Did the leaf think? Yes. What the heck does that mean? The blonde protested. Leaves don't think. How the heck is this supposed to help? With a hand, Jiraiya interrupted his student's oncoming rant and met Naruto's gaze with a burning seriousness. Exactly. The sage said. This isn't a trick question. Leaves don't think. But, Naruto protested. But what does that mean? It means, you little shit, Jiraiya answered. That you need to stop thinking and just start being. This leaf doesn't think about where it is, it just is. You're having this difficulty because every time you jump, you're thinking about where you were instead of just accepting where you are. For a long moment, Naruto seemed to take in his teacher's words with a grave seriousness. I think, the blonde said after almost a minute of silence. That this is a crummy way of teaching this. Jiraiya groaned, pinching the bridge of his nose with his fingers. Listen, he snapped. They don't exactly write guideline analogies for space-time ninjutsu. Can you just try it? Not thinking. Jiraiya nodded. It should be second nature to you. Naruto gave his teacher a scathing look, but only turned his back, storming towards the training grounds. Across from him in the field, a single wooden log sat with a piece of paper adhered to its surface. The paper was a maze of symbols and calligraphy. All right, Naruto all but growled to himself, pushing his mind away from his dumb, insulting new teacher and back to figuring out how the hell this worked. Don't think. He repeated. He thought it, too. Don't think. Don't think. No think. No. Think. No think. No think. No. There was a brilliant flash, a yellow explosion across the course. Then nothing. Reality seemed to tilt, and then Naruto reappeared behind the dummy. His breath was ragged, rasping at the sudden return to existence. I'm not, he whispered, whirling with excitement towards Jiraya. I'm not gonna hurl. Jiraya said nothing as he rose from his seat and approached the log. Extending his hand, his fingers wrapped around a three-pronged kunai buried 30 centimeters into the wood. There was a thunk as he yanked the knife from the divot. Jiraya's lips stretched into a low, tooth-filled grin with a click of his tongue. Now this, he began, his eyes moving to Naruto with a fire that caught the blonde in his step. Like being seen for the first time as something potential. Naruto's heart swelled at the thought, but his elatement was subdued by an undignified yelp as the kunai rocketed near his feet and embedded itself in the dirt. The sage spun on a heel, waving his hand. Do it again. The moment it was thrown, Neji knew what it was. Small, glistening, a seal-wrapped handle beneath a trident spike of metal. There wasn't a shinobi on earth who didn't know the tools of the flying thunder god, weapons of Konoha's yellow flash. What didn't process, didn't click inside his mind, was what happened after that. The village idiot knowing one of the most powerful jutsu in history was like imagining a carp lobbing a samurai's katana from a stream. In Neji's mind, even giving the event odds, as though it was something that happened in reality, was absurd. Much higher on the list of likely options were that the idiot had picked up a replica in some backwater, second-hand replica store for loser shinobi who lose, and thought it would give him an edge. For a moment, he pictured a wide-eyed and mystified Naruto, eagerly drinking in the every word of a half-rate conman, promising the blonde the speed of the fourth, if he uses these 100% guaranteed authentic replicas in battle. If he hadn't been so full of frothing hatred, he might have pitied the fool. Replica or not, the kunai the blonde had thrown was two things, sharp, and headed directly for Neji's face. The prudent move was to dodge, and so he would. The tactical move was a little more complex, but he was a genius, after all. Lean left, pivot off back his back foot. Surge forward, use your momentum. Hold your left arm weak, with the right arm ready to blast forward and claim victory. Quick, efficient, foolproof. But none of that happened. There was no counter-attack, no perfectly poised strike. Neji had not gotten so far as to pivot on his back heel before everything seemed to stop. An explosion of yellow. Naruto's voice sounded like he'd just ran to Kumo and back, and Neji could feel the boy's heaving chest behind him. His Byakugan could see the blonde's knees, hands, his whole body shaking on the brim of exhaustion, but Neji could barely focus on such things. His mind was reeling, a flash bang of confusion clouding his battle plan. He couldn't move, couldn't retaliate. The only thing he could focus on was the icy prick of steel pressed against the skin of his throat. Ah, Naruto rasped. The way the blonde's chest heaved, Neji wondered just how much energy the move consumed. I wouldn't move if I were you. I sharpened the shit out of this thing. On cue, Neji felt metal like ice scald against the warmth of his skin. His breath caught against his throat, and he swallowed hard. A prick tinged his jaw, and his mind agonized over the single, wet droplet he could feel rolling towards his chest. Impossible. Neji's mind reeled, muscles tensing and fury surging. There was no way that he was being restrained. No way that what had just transpired was real. Genjutsu. His mind roared, seeing through the deception. You think this will stop the all-seeing eye of the Byakugan? Neji declared, fingers flying into a seal as he channeled his chakra. Parlor trick genjutsu won't save you. Kai. The emboldened Colosseum waited on bated breath, all eyes glued to the scene. Neji waited, eyes ready for that familiar fade of a false reality like dust on the wind. But there was no fade. No shimmer to reveal the truth. Reality persisted, constant, the only sound the haggard exhales of his captor. What? The prodigy whispered, his voice wavering into a far-off swirl as the heaviness of the body pressed against his back weighed down like a train. Kai. Again. And again. A fourth time. What? Neji seethed. What is happening? So much for genius, Naruto rasped, but the exhaustion couldn't mask the smugness in his voice. It ain't a genjutsu, so you can cut that shit. If the taunt was meant to enrage him further, Neji couldn't tell. His mind was busy piecing together the last 4 seconds of reality. Nothing. Yellow, knife at his throat. Nothing. Yellow, knife at his throat. Victory. Yellow, defeat. But you. Neji's whispered, voice awash in confusion as his Byakugan faded. Veins eased back, leaving nothing but milky white orbs that looked like the sea he was lost in. Not a genjutsu. Hey. Yeah. Neji didn't need his all-seeing eyes to see pride wrapped itself around the boy's words. It filled his stomach with a writhing lurch. Master Jiraya calls it space-time, ninjutsu, or something. Naruto explained, as though his words were normal and any of this was normal and not living in an upside-down world. The blonde gave a casual shrug, as though further technical details escaped either his memory or his interest. It's kind of complicated, but it's cool as hell. Space-time, ninjutsu, Neji repeated. It was less a statement and more weighing whether or not those words were real. He was snapped from his thoughts as the pinch of steel brushed against his neck. Oi, Proctor. The blonde hollered, shifting his head to make eye contact with the still dumbfounded Hayate, falling disinterested with the Hyuga's ramblings. This counts as a submission, yeah. The Chunin didn't respond, and Naruto had time to ponder how the toothpick stayed hanging even though the proctor's mouth was gaping open. Hayate's response was a racking cough, which was good because it hid the utter shock running down his nerves. Memories of yellow flashes swirled just behind his eyes, and, suddenly, the image of a blonde, loudmouthed genin looked too much like a poster he'd had in his room as a child. No, Hayate said, his voice monotonous and droll because it didn't matter if this kid had summoned a biju, he had an appearance to keep up. Chunin didn't gape at genin, and he'd be damned if the whole village would see the crumbling of his meticulously cultivated aesthetic. Your opponent is standing. Victory is by knockout or forfeit. He continued, before raising an eyebrow. Knockout, forfeit, or death, that is. Either way, giving him a hug from behind won't cut it. Something about the phrase, or death, when combined with a bladed knife brought Neji's arms empty to his side. Shock gave way to the reminder that he was, in fact, being held hostage. Well, shit, Naruto said, and Neji was reminded that he was being held hostage by an idiot. I'm going to be honest, I don't have a clue how I could knock you unconscious right now without you maybe escaping. And that's not going to work, for me. So, what? Neji hissed, inhaling deep and trying to calm his mind back into zen. He shifted in the blonde's hold, pushing at the common escape points of a bind and biting down the frustration of discovering that someone seemed to have actually trained the idiot how to hold the knife poised at Neji's neck. You expect me to surrender? I mean, Naruto replied, sounding unsure how this was a conversation he was still having. The other option is, or death, so yeah. I kind of figured. Neji said nothing, and his silence echoed throughout the arena. Setting his jaw, the Hyuga prodigy rose to his full height, his eyes leveling in the distance as his shoulders rolled back. The blade of the kunai remained glued to the thin red gorge it had cut, a hairline trickle ebbed by steel. Then kill me. Naruto audibly scoffed. I'm sorry, he offered, wondering if his grip around Neji's neck had been too tight. He could recall Jiraya, just days before, describing the effects of loss of blood circulation for various body parts. Stupid, suicidal declarations during a stupid contest seemed to fall right about there. Say what now? You heard me, Uzumaki. Neji replied, and Naruto didn't like the way his name sounded like a dirty word when Neji said it. The blonde's jaw clenched as he bit down the sudden urge to knee this jackass in the kidneys. Listen here, prick. Naruto all but growled, his voice and patience dried up by the encounter. I don't know who or what crawled up your and died, but I'm here offering you a chance to. If you think you are sparing me by allowing me to surrender, you are mistaken. Neji interrupted, his voice like rocks grating against steel. Naruto's face contorted, his annoyance only receding for confusion to take its place. No, the blonde reasoned back, his words slow and deliberate. I think you're misinterpreting the other option in the surrender or death equation. You see, death is, like, not the one you want to pick. It was difficult, as the village pariah spoke to him in metered, patronizing tones, for Neji to not fling himself forward onto the blade. The kunai at his neck was sharp, but was it really worse than being held lectured to by the intellectual equivalent of a farm animal? He exhaled, and let the rage travel down his arms and dissipate in the clench of his fist. Spare me your opinions, I care not. Neji replied, his voice and gaze piercing into the concrete wall 20 meters away. I don't know what kind of trickery you managed to pull or whether that was even what I think it was. Either way, I'll not be mocked by trash such as you. Kill me and be done with this. Do not allow my failure to linger. The demand was met by nearly a minute of stunned silence before Naruto's brain could think of a response. Okay, I'm sorry, what the actual is wrong with you? Neji scowled, lips curling in a digest. If only the blonde idiot had the Byakugan, then he might have been able to see the contempt rolling across his face. Enough of your vulgarities. Fate has decided. Fate. Naruto spat, like the word scalded his throat to even utter. Neji fought a wince as the blonde's nails curled, digging into the skin on his arm. You think I beat you because of fate? It wasn't a question, but trash didn't dictate the terms, even in the jaws of defeat. Fate is the all-decider. Fate is, listen up, you freaking turd. Naruto snarled, the end of his short patience sizzling like a fuse. I don't know who the hell you think you are, but I whooped you because you underestimated me, just like Jiraya sensei said you would. I pulled a fast one with a kick-ass new jutsu, and now you go and attribute it to fate. The blonde heaved, heavy and hot, and Neji wondered if he was truly about to slit his throat. He inhaled, stealing his mind and vision, and prepared to be dispatched. But the blow never came. Naruto's chest rolled with a low chuckle. He whispered, hands still shaking and blade still poised at Neji's throat, so sharp and so unsteady. No wonder Hinata tried so hard to kick your. You're ridiculous. Shut up. Neji seethed, fingers balling into the fists he so desperately wanted to bury in the blonde's stomach. His eyes saw all, and all turned red. You know nothing of what transpired that fight, and I'll sooner die than hear nameless trash like you justify the Hyuga. You know nothing of our history, nothing of the oppression of the main branch. Main branch, Naruto replied, voice lost and naive. Neji breathed, and fire filled his belly. What the hell does you being a young prick have to do with the main branch? Everything. Neji's reply was so quick, so desperate and filled with hate that it scared even him as it left his tongue. His nails buried themselves into his palm because his body couldn't flare with the seething fury that it wanted to. It has everything to do with them. She represents everything that fate has ever wrought into my life. Every injustice, every loss. Neji's voice grew distant, but his body trembled from the torrent flooding out of him. His head fell, and his milk-white eyes poured distantly into his bloody palms. Fate may have given me this destiny. His voice was barely a whisper, but it shook through his soul. But I will not be mocked by the rise of failures such as her. For a moment, Naruto remained silent. This was a stunning turn of events, really, as, even a month prior, his immediate response would have been something adversarial. Some know-it-all ponce with angst to make even that Sasuke bastard green with envy. Naruto, naturally, would rise above such provocation. He'd say something cutting and deep, like any real hero should. Cry me a river, douche. You're the real monster here. You, dude. But that was the old Naruto. Old Naruto said things quickly, because you could say things quickly when you didn't think about what you said. New Naruto wasn't much better, honestly, but there was something, maybe a little. While his heart and his fists voted that, you, was the best way to answer the angst sandwich getting verbally fed to him, something Jiraya had told him before their fight fogged his mind. Fogged it and clouded his thoughts like when he left the house and couldn't remember if he'd turned the stove off. That destiny you're talking about. For you. Naruto began, voice unsure and unfamiliar with discourse. He wasn't used to having prior knowledge before going into a situation. This was untested waters. You talking about the caged bird thing? Like a waterfall onto a campfire. Neji could feel the blood, wet and sticky and dripping from the holes his anger and nails had bore into his palms, but the tension and rage dissipated like mist. His breath hitched. His eyes were cloudy. You, he croaked, and he felt light and skinny and it was like he'd gone blind. His throat went raw. His heart thundered. How do you know about that? Naruto squirmed, but steeled himself. He'd started conversation, now. He was using his words, not his fists, to explain his opinions. Ironically, this lesson in dialogue over violence had been forcibly beaten into his head by Jiraiya for the past 3 weeks, but Naruto couldn't worry about that right now. Yeah, Naruto answered, Jiraiya-sensei told me about it. Said it's pretty shitty. A lifetime of oppression, an entire family line, subjugated and ground into the dirt by their own kin. Forced to walk around with a brand that could cripple their body and tear asunder their mind at the call of a single hand seal. And the dead last said, pretty shitty. Shitty. Neji repeated, numb and feeling a previously unfelt level of rage building in his body, like a tornado going through a volcano. He was going to turn around, kunai to the neck be damned, and he was going to throttle that ignorant little. Human beings aren't meant to be subject to one another. Slaves. Naruto said. His voice sounded deeper, lost but not unsure. Neji found his voice dried up. He mentioned he thought he had a way to remove it. Naruto finished. The seal, that is. 2. Neji sputtered, and his murderous train skidded off the tracks and caught fire. His tongue turned to lead. He didn't realize his fist uncurled. Remove, he whispered. Remove the seal. Yeah, Naruto answered with a cough and maybe empathy. Neji couldn't tell. He doesn't bring it up with the Hyuga being here, and all, but he was showing me some of the outline. It's sort of like the one on. Neji didn't realize that Naruto stopped himself just short of saying, me. In fact, Neji wasn't aware of much of anything, anymore. The ground and the world were uncertain and alien. His stomach lurched. You, remove, Neji whispered, the words felt like secrets, say them any louder and they would disappear like a dream. Neji felt called to voice one of the only questions he had ever had. Is there a way to remove the seal? The question lingered, and Naruto's answer stalled because he could feel what seemed the weight whole world hinge on his next response. Listen, he coughed, I don't want to get your hopes up, here. Master Jiraiya just wanted me to know your weaknesses, so he told me about that seal. He mentioned he'd found a way, and he told me about your backstory. That's why he told me. I don't know any more about it, but he does. It was a bit of a cop-out, for sure, but still the truth. Naruto couldn't shake the vague notion that answering with something not truthful would have the Hyuga genuinely trying to kill himself. There was nothing more truthful than Naruto not knowing something, so that fit the bill. However, but we are, kind of, like, in the middle of something here. He added, if you forfeit the match, I'll bring you to talk to him about it. He was so earnest, so painfully sincere in every stupid word that he could heave across his lips, it made Neji's chest hurt. The Hyuga prodigy exhaled, and his breath was like cracks in a dam. Still holding, still clinging, but only just. Why? Naruto blinked. Why? What? Why? Neji answered, his voice wavering like a flag caught in a hurricane. Why tell me this? Why are you doing this? Listen, I just want to win this match, alright. Naruto answered. It wasn't the empathetic or caring thing to reply, but it was honest. Lying took energy, and he was just too damn tired to make up some sob story. You don't seem awful, you're just an. Nobody deserves to live a life caged like that. I know. Neji didn't understand why Naruto paused, but the hesitation in the blonde's words felt heavy like metal bars. It made his gut wrench, and Neji hated how he couldn't understand why. I know what it's like, alright. And it's. And when I'm Hokage, I'm not going to let anyone pull any of this kind of shit. But, I'm not Hokage, yet, so I'm just going to start with helping you. Neji stayed silent for almost a minute, and Naruto began to worry that his words fell on deaf ears. That would pose a significant problem, as he could already feel his arm muscles begin to lock up, desperately crying for relief from the hold and. Proctor. Neji's voice was sharp as glass, and it cuts through the arena. I surrender. Hayate nodded, and Neji felt the rush as the three-pronged kunai against his throat was whisked away. Delicate, almost reverently, it went back into the blonde's holster. The next moment, Neji was released. Naruto pushed off, shaking his arms to try and slough off the fatigue rolling up his muscles. Neji wasn't tired, but everything hurt. His feet drug little tracks into the dirt as he moved away. Holy shit! Naruto gasped, hands behind his head as he circled in place talking because even if he was tired he couldn't not move. Doing it when I'm the one making the seal, that's exhausting. From his spot a couple meters away, Neji gave a slow, shifting turn. His body twisting until milky white eyes stared back into Naruto's pools of blue. The prodigy said nothing, and Naruto squirmed. So does sometime later this week work? He offered, feeling exhausted and deeply uncomfortable as Neji's eyes just stared at him, all glassy and expressionless. Because, I've gotta be honest, I'm gonna need a minute or something. I'm still definitely not used to that. Are you telling the truth? Neji asked. He didn't move, didn't meet the blonde's eyes, and his voice barely even made it to his opponent. Huh, Naruto blinked, before waving a disinterested hand as he continued to pant like a dog. Oh, yeah, it's a promise. That's my ninja creed. I won't go back on my word. Neji stared for a long moment at the declaration in complete and utter silence. After 3 seconds of no movement, Naruto's face scrunched as the blonde shifted uncomfortably. Well, he demanded. Say something, you weirdo. It was slight, imperceptible even. But Neji didn't say anything. He laughed. 1, then 2, a giggle turned to a chuckle to full-blown barks of laughter. The sound echoed through the still silent arena and rippled out into the summer air. Naruto, unaware of what the hell was so funny, didn't laugh, took a cautious step back. He'd taken Neji for the broody type, and if Sasuke had ever started laughing, his first instinct would have been to back away slowly. He figured the same procedure would fit here. Good luck, Uzumaki Naruto. The proud Hyuga called, the declaration echoing behind him as the prodigy entered the nearby tunnel and disappeared. Naruto stretched, pushing his hands to the base of his back till he heard his spine pop in a few places. So, he said loudly, turning towards Hayate. We done here? 'Cause I'm hungry. Hayate didn't know how to reply, but he was overwhelmed with relief that he hadn't signed on to take a genin team this year. Winner, Uzumaki Naruto. Jiraya. People had forgotten Sarutobi Hiruzen. Age tended to do that. The years drag on, and the memories of how things used to be just seem to erode. Sarutobi Hiruzen, the god of shinobi. There was a time where he had been hailed as the second coming of Hashirama himself. Undisputed power, the will of fire reincarnate. Konoha under his gaze had been the most prosperous, the most protected in its history. But people had forgotten. For Jiraya's money, it was the gimmicks. People only remembered the things that were flashy, the things that stood out. Hashirama and his wood style, Tobirama and his water jutsu, even though his forbidden jutsu were far, far more dangerous. Then Minato had come along, and everyone seemed to forget about poor, aging Sarutobi Hiruzen. Jiraiya knew better. Brutal efficiency. That was the way he described his former master. All the power, all the finesse and skill of his predecessors with none of the ego. None of the drama. People had forgotten how powerful the third Hokage was because no one he fought survived to tell some horror story of their battle. Efficiency was the most dangerous shinobi trait, and that's why Hiruzen was the god. A shinobi to be feared above all others on the battlefield. One who didn't fight for glory or infamy, only purpose. The living incarnation of the will of fire. As Jiraiya turned to face his former master, his heart clenched in his chest. A pressure, a wave, surged through his body and sent a chill down his spine. Their eyes met, and Jiraiya stared down the flame. Come with me, the cage commanded. Now, it was a testament to decades of training and discipline that Jiraiya could even stand. The third Hokage's chakra wasn't flared, but the chill of his voice dug into the box like thunder. Jiraiya forced out a nod before turning, disappearing down the nearby corridor. Hiruzen rose from his chair, his movements metered, calculating. If one looked closely, there were spider web splinters left in the wood of his chair. Without another word, Hiruzen moved to follow his pupil until a voice called out from behind. Hokage-sama. The cage spoke. Sarutobi paused, the company of the box forgotten in the turn of events. Yes, Kage-sama. The honorifics were there, but the conversation balanced on the edge of a razor. I was not aware, the veiled Cage questioned. His voice sounded different than before. Strained, concerned, scared. That Konoha had raised a second yellow flash. Sarutobi's gaze was a line, his eyes watching in silence as a hapless boy heaved against his opponent in the arena. He exhaled, and the brim of his hat shaded his eyes from view. Then you now know, Kage-sama. If the Kage expected more details, he was left wanting. The god of shinobi disappeared down the corridor behind his student. What? He growled as he reached Jiraiya. A fury. A fire. Have you done? You know exactly what I've done. Jiraiya countered. Like a man juggling fire. And if you're asking me, it's something that should have been done along. Do not. Hiruzen's voice is like an avalanche. No one is asking you. You do not get a voice. Do you have any idea what you've done? What I've done? Jiraiya growled. I've taught my student. What you've done? Hiruzen's presence swelled, a circle of cracks bursting into the concrete under his feet. Is give an open bounty from every ninja nation on earth to a child. He's not a child. Jiraiya met Sarutobi's accusation with a hiss. He's a soldier and he's been one since the day you let him join the academy. I let him join to protect him. Sarutobi countered. To learn to control his strengths. To let him live a normal life. Normal. Jiraiya's hand smacked against the stone wall of the walkway. Spider-webbed fissures bloomed from the contact. Is that what you think he is? Normal. Naruto's never been normal and will never be normal. He is a child who deserves the right to live without a target on his back. He's always had one. Jiraiya snarled, eyes flaring. He's had a target on his back since the moment Minato stopped that monster, and all you've done is hamstring him by trying to not play favorites. The glare in Hiruzen's eyes was ice. You would lecture me, Hiruzen answered. You have the audacity to question my judgment. Brown eyes simmered beneath the brim of the Hokage's hat. You abandon the boy for 13 years and then walk in with the gall to question me. The cage seethed. I won't have it. Audacity. Even from you. Jiraiya's teeth ground in his cheek with a click as he reared back to his full height. He was always taller than Hiruzen, but it felt like more, now. Trust me, he began. His voice was a mixture of will and shame and it tasted in his throat. A few things have become very clear, very quickly. I have plenty of blame on myself for harming my pupil's son. The Hokage's son would have been treated properly in the city he saved. Hiruzen hadn't been this angry in years, his fists trembled in his hands. Get out. When the tournament's through. Jiraiya answered. We will. We. Hiruzen balked, unsure if his anger had clouded his hearing. You think Naruto is going anywhere? Jiraiya nodded. He will, the sage replied, reaching into his pocket and pulling a small scroll from his belt. Because they're here looking for him, now. The tremor in the Hokage's hand slowed, tension easing but for a moment in his fingers as he recalibrated his thoughts around the statement. Reaching forward, he snatched the scroll from his student's hand and read the text. Almost a minute passed before another word was spoken. Explain. Neither man was willing to let go of the tension, blades poised at throats, but the command shifted in Jiraya's spine and it was like he was reporting again. A report I got last week. He said. I was taking him after the tournament whether he was my pupil or not. For the first time, it was Sarutobi who realized he was not the only one to become old and bitter. The way they argued in his mind was student to teacher, but this. There were too many lines under the war paint, now. Jiraiya was far more than just a child. Why? He said. Did you not tell me this sooner? Because you look a lot more weak than you are when it looks like I'm not still scared of you. When I can come in and fight with you, the sage replied. You look a lot easier to assassinate. The tension evaporated like a falling tide, but the new reveal lingered on the gaps like resin. Jiraiya would barely see his master's eyes in the dim light of the tunnel. So that was his play. Something was wrong, so to further the tension he publicly humiliates the Hokage in his own home. Such measures, such disrespect. Hiruzen found himself momentarily remorseful he had failed to see underneath the underneath. You're absolutely sure of this? No. Jiraiya answered. But their agents are here. Something's happening and whatever it is doesn't want us to be on speaking terms. But that's close enough for me. Sarutobi pocketed the scroll in emotion, a silent nod in affirmation. Without a sound, the third Hokage was walking back to the box, alone. Jiraiya, he called out, tilting his head to only a profile. Do not be mistaken. This will not be the end of our discussion. Regardless of this report, you still made a decision that puts Naruto in grave danger. The topic of protecting Naruto is the priority, but Jiraiya's answer was like firm but cold. His gaze lingered and fingers flexed against his fist. With a silent pivot, Jiraiya began his march down the corridor. But, for once, we agree, he called back. This conversation is far from over. No way. It was Kiba, of course, whose voice broke through. He sounded like he'd seen a ghost, whispering and repeating into the silence. There's no way. Absolutely no way. No way. Shut up, Kiba, Ino hissed, but her eyes never left the center of the arena. In fact, all eyes in the stadium remained transfixed to the orange jumpsuit at the center. Did you? Choji whispered, putting down his chips and committing the entirety of his attention to something that wasn't food. Sakura, did you know about this? She was pretty sure that he nudged her shoulder, but Sakura wasn't home. Of course she didn't know. Kiba snipped. She didn't even know he'd been gone for a freaking month. Kiba, I said shut it. Ino growled, taking a defensive stance between her frenemy and the dog boy. Sakura could feel Ino's arm, gentle but alarmed, latch onto her own. Sakura, she diverted, head dropping into a conspiratorial tone. Was that what I think that was? Sakura opened her mouth, a fish gaping for an answer or an insight or anything that made sense, but nothing came. She shook her head, and fumbled for words. I don't, she stammered. I don't know what just happened. I do. Shikamaru's voice cut through the quiet like a knife, but his gaze was unflinching towards the center stage. His shoulders and frame were hunched, hand tracing his lips as his eyes absorbed the scene. It reminded Ino of how he looked playing his father in shogi. A new piece was on the board. The game had been altered. Sakura could only watch in a stunned silence as three masked Anbu materialized around the blonde in a swirl of leaves. Their kunai were drawn, defensive. She recognized it as VIP Escort Formation Alpha 6. They'd learned it in the academy as a cornerstone stance for defending mission-critical targets against unknown aliens. Naruto. Her inner voice whispered. Why were they protecting Naruto? What was happening to Naruto? Who even was Naruto? For a name she'd yelled and berated and called out to over 1,000 times, his name didn't sound sure anymore. The only source of reassurance she could take was that Naruto seemed to be equally startled and confused by his sudden security detail. Hey, he squawked. What the heck's the big idea? There was another swirl of leaves and Jiraiya was standing beside him, hand on his shoulder. He whispered something low and quick the blonde's ear, but Sakura couldn't make it out. For a moment, it looked like familiarity. Naruto was confused, and Sakura could almost hear the defiance welling up inside him, the refusal to listen or be told anything by anyone. But Naruto didn't fight back at all. The boy in the center bit his tongue, and gave a steady nod. Jiraiya placed a hand on his shoulder, and Uzumaki Naruto disappeared from the stadium in a puff of white smoke. Sakura stared at the empty space where her teammate had once stood in complete silence with the rest of the emerald arena. There was no cheering, no cries or calls. The collective air seemed to be ebbed out of the very arena, broken only by the static of a frazzled announcer over the PA. We're going to take a brief intermission. Please stand by. A rustle of leaves, and the sound of desperate gasps. Ah, shit. Naruto let loose a low hiss through his teeth. He funneled more water from the canteen and promptly spat it out at his feet. It's like sprinting a 10K every time. With a FLLT, and other sounds Jiraiya could have done without, he took another swig and pushed a small stream of water through his teeth and onto a nearby rock. Naruto offered his master a questioning glance. Does it get less? He paused, finding the right word. Awful. Like, even a little. Jiraiya considered the remark with snort. I don't remember the fourth or the second complaining so much. He countered, eyes glued to the town below. You just aren't doing it right. Doing it right. Naruto's chest swelled and he took 2 steps forward with all his height. What do you mean doing it right? I thought I was doing just fine. Jiraiya snorted, an up and down glance to his preening apprentice. Kid, you're doing that jutsu like someone trying to carve the Hokage's monument with a stick of dynamite. Overwhelming force and non-existent finest. It's a miracle you can do it at all. Defiance was, of course, the first emotion that sprang to Naruto's mind. I don't see anybody else here doing it. Naruto grumbled, chest puffed and ego bruised. Jiraiya didn't immediately answer, but the small grimace that crossed his mind gave Naruto a moment's pause. Wait, he continued, slower and deliberate. I don't get it. Why don't I see anyone else doing this jutsu? Just because this was the first time the blonde was considering the question didn't mean it wasn't a good question. The Hiroshin no Jutsu was, without question, one of the most widely known and feared jutsu on the planet. With all of its power, if a genin could learn it in a month, why wasn't every chunin worth their salt slaving day and night to try and master the technique? Jiraiya leaned back, but his shoulders looked heavy. The sage made a low clicking noise in his cheek. Performing the Hiroshin is more than just knowing the seals and channeling chakra. Naruto squinted, a calculating look across his features. I don't get it. Jiraiya let himself sigh, moving his vision from the horizon and back to his pupil. Before any shinobi can do a jutsu, there's 2 things that have to happen. The first, most obvious, is that they have to know the technique and have the chakra to perform it. Signs or patterns, stances, the works, and then you have to have the juice. If they don't have the raw ingredients, the jutsu's never going to happen. So I just know the technique and have the chakra. Naruto floated. The face the blonde wore while trying to piece things together was like a child attempting to learn an instrument. Hesitant, more afraid of bad notes than bad practice. That's it. Jiraiya snorted, letting a smirk cross the left side of his cheek so that his student could see his humor at the comment. When you say it like that, yeah. But let's take a step back from the privilege tower and talk about how much of a jackpot you hit. The Hiroshin no Jutsu is one of the most complex ceiling configuration ever written. There are, maybe, 4 or 5 sealing systems more complex than this jutsu, and even fewer people on Earth who know how to draw it properly. Jiraya nudged the kunai in Naruto's hand, drawing his eyes to the lattice of ink and seal wrapped around the handle. The fact that I taught you how to draw that has almost doubled the number of people alive who know how to draw it for combat. Jiraiya continued, pulling the blade from Naruto's hand and tracing a finger along the writing's outer edges. Even Sarutobi doesn't know the variant I decided to share with you. On top of that, the seal is too complex to copy on short notice. The ink degrades over time, and understanding the symbols before they faded would be all but impossible. It'd be like writing a whole book, a masterpiece word for word after hearing it whispered in a crowded bar. Naruto wasn't really sure how to respond to such information, the implication of his fortune or the reminder that the squiggles he had painstakingly learned to copy in the past month were really generational talent in seal form. Like solving the world's hardest test by memorizing the answer beforehand. He let out a soft, "Oh." Jiraiya laughed. Understatement of the century, kid. Jiraiya flipped the kunai into his hand, the metal tie prong slapping against his palm as he extended the handle to the blonde. I'll teach you the seal and what they mean in time, but you would be wise to not forget that you're wielding something you don't even come close to understanding, right now. Naruto didn't have an answer for that, but he took the hilt as both their eyes wandered back onto the stadium in the distance. There was a buzz of crowd noise in the air, but the wind from atop the monument kept it to a low murmur. What's the other thing? Naruto called out, eyes narrowed in almost painful focus. Jiraiya blinked. What? You said every jutsu requires 2 things. For effect, he held out his fingers and counted, just to be sure. One's knowing the technique, but you didn't say what the other thing was. Oh, it was Jiraya's turn to fall quiet. Right. There was a pause, the sound of the wind passing in between, before Jiraiya found his answer. Some jutsu. His words started, but his voice seemed to linger. Dragging its feet and hoping something else would pop up and end the conversation sooner than his next sentence would. Some jutsu need more than just knowing the technique in order to perform. Some jutsu need the user to be compatible with Hijutsu, too. Compatible. Naruto turned the word over on his tongue as he spoke. Like the jutsu won't work if you're not the right fit, even if you know all the steps. Jiraiya gave a simple nod. Pretty much. Another pause. How do you know I'd be compatible? Jiraiya clicked his tongue, again and rolled his thumb across his knuckles. He laughed, a single and hollow breath as his eyes met only the dirt. Just had a hunch. If Naruto wanted more, he was left wanting. The wind picked up, but the line of discussion drifted away on the northern gusts. Jiraiya wasn't sure if his pupil was reading the room or just picking a new topic, but he welcomed the subject change. So, what the heck are we doing up here? Naruto asked, waving a vague hand over the sprawling city below. Why did you take us to the top of the monument? I wanted to watch the fights. Vantage point. Jiraiya replied. We're watching. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Advantage over what? Jiraiya made a small, pained noise like a dying animal. Kid. He pleaded. I don't want you to take this personally, but you and I are about to be spending a lot of time together. I want you to ask questions and learn, but I'm begging you. From the bottom of my heart, if you do nothing else, I want you to think before every single thing you say. Not just let it roll on off your tongue and out into the air. Every word, every sentence. Give it a good hard think before you speak. I want good questions, only. The words left his mouth, but as his ears listened to himself, a scowl etched across his own face. That was harsh, and his temper wasn't fair to the kid. Annoying. Yes. Deserving of ridicule. Maybe, but not right now. Ah, kid, he offered, shifting on his heels. I'm a little distracted, and that was too. The sage stopped, trailing off as he realized he was talking to air. Naruto's eyes were on the stadium and his face a concerted scowl. Unmoving and unclenching save for frantic blue eyes that scoured the horizon. What are we watching for? The focus in the boy's voice was palpable. Jiraiya blinked. He blinked again. Naruto was still looking. Eyes squinted, staring into the sun without so much as a hand raised to help him see, but the boy was trying too hard. The effort was palpable. Bending to one knee, the sage appraised his pupil with what felt like suspicion. "We're looking," he began, recording each twitch in the blonde's focus. "For anything that looks odd. Suspicious. Something out of place." "You mean sketchy?" the blonde asked. "Like that dude on the roof." In an instant, the binoculars were back in Jiraya's hands. "Anbu," the sage whispered, "exposed." "Yeah," Naruto grumbled, squinting his eyes further and trying to make up for the fact that all these people just kind of looked like dots, but that one dot looked weird. "Shouldn't they be like, hidden?" Jiraiya shoved the binoculars back into the boy's hands, Naruto bobbling the optics as he tried to pull the stadium back into view. "Tell me." Jiraiya squatted, leaning into a crossed-leg stance as his hands clasped in his center. "What color masks are they wearing?" Naruto strained against the glass, bopping his vision between the four figures now looming above the stadium roof. "White masks," he answered, adding to the description. "Maybe some, like, markings or face paint on them, too." "And what are they wearing?" "Black." Naruto waved a hand down his own body, accentuating the full color palette of the mystery dots. "Head to toe except for the white masks." Naruto turned, a strange and cool sensation tripping at the corner of his senses. The breeze was gone, noise and birds and sounds of the forest quieting, a silence stretching as it swirled around Jiraya's energy. Were those dark lines forming under Jiraya's eyes? Naruto leaned in closer to see if something was forming or if it was just his imagination or. "Get down!" Jiraiya snapped, body shooting backwards and bringing Naruto slammed into the dirt beneath him. Naruto had time to gasp, but the rest of his alarm was frozen as the sound of distant explosions ripped through the silence. The horizon shimmered, a rolling curtain of air and wind popping seconds later as it crashed across the monument's head with winds whipping. Jiraya's body held Naruto pinned for the blasts, but was up and back on the ridge the moment the shockwaves subsided. Scrambling behind him, Naruto's mouth fell slack as his eyes mirrored the roiling smoke. "Fire!" Naruto observed, words jumping to only what his eyes could process. "Someone's exploding the tournament." Another explosion, Jiraya's lips stretched to an unmovable line. "Someone's attacking the city," he corrected, a litany of fires and distant screams popping like fireworks in the night sky. Naruto loved when fireworks exploded. Something in the way the distant pops of flame looked in the city made his stomach lurch. "Something's wrong," Jiraiya whispered as the sound of explosions gave way to burning and fear. Naruto balked, eyeing between the explosions and his teacher as the smoke roiled into the sky like little pillars of chaos. "No shit," he exclaimed. "Someone's attacking Konoha." "That's not what I mean," Jiraiya muttered, more to himself than to his student. The explosions were there, but there was something more. Something that touched against his skin and whispered on the trees. "There's something else. Something building something." The air clicked, and a screech exploded through the entire city. It wasn't an explosion, there wasn't force or fire or smoke, but Naruto felt his blood run cold as an invisible pressure exploded inside his veins. He felt like he was suffocating, being buried by a weight of something pressing down on his lungs until they popped. Just pure and distilled fear. Naruto had to stop his hands from trembling as a shifting figure appeared on the horizon west of the stadium. What is that?" Naruto stammered, hands flashing for his kunai with a white-knuckled grip. Jiraya's gaze hardened to a line as he channeled the churning in his chest. "A demon." Jiraiya rose, rolling his back and shoulders as his eyes fixed on the source. Or, at least one trying to rip out of his host. Rip out of his. Even amidst the wave of pressure, the breath in Naruto's lungs seemed to evaporate. "That kid." Naruto's voice was a whisper. "That kid from Sand was the Ikibi, I imagine." Jiraiya confirmed. "And it looks like the seal is ripping at the seams." That's not pure demonic chakra, but it's closer than anyone needs to be getting. But I thought. Naruto's mind reeled. The events of the past month reframed under the lenses of barely averted natural disasters. Then that was why during the exam, all the weirdness, all the looks, the realization that crossed Naruto's mind tasted like spit in hindsight. Like the pieces of a puzzle that hadn't just been laid out, but had been nearly put together for weeks and he still hadn't seen the full picture. For a moment, he wondered about what other things he had missed when Naruto's heart pounded. Sasuke! He exclaimed, Hiraishin kunai flashing into his hands. He doesn't know and he's fighting him. I've got to help. In a blink, Naruto's arm reeled back and prepared to chunk the kunai in the direction of the battlefield. His arm surged with wild and uncontrolled chakra as he leaned forward, but was frozen with a smack as Jiraya's hand clasped the blonde's bicep mid-throw. What the hell are you doing? Jiraya hissed, narrowed eyes and clenched teeth. Going to save that idiot. Naruto shot back in reply, as though it was the most obvious answer in the world. He's fighting and he doesn't know that he's fighting a Jinchuriki. Let you go. Jiraiya repeated, as though it was the most idiotic answer in the world. Let you go to do what? Sprint blindly into battle against a deranged Jinchuriki while an invasion begins from an unknown force. Jiraya's grip on Naruto's arm tightened, and he physically lifted his student off the ground. If you want to do something that could get you and your friends killed, you just came up with a great plan. Jiraya's grip was iron. Naruto twisted himself with grunts of defiance. Or, if you want to remember what I've been telling you all month and calm down, we can do something that can actually be helpful. Naruto squirmed, fury and panic writhing through his nerves like lightning. Jiraya's grip was stronger. Seconds passed, and the blonde's hand loosened, kunai clattering to the stone below. His eyes, however, remained sharp as any blade. I have to save them, he growled. He wasn't pulling against his teacher's grip, but the flare in the blonde's teeth looked like fangs. I will save them. Jiraiya released, and Naruto leapt back, rolling his shoulder. The boy rounded on his teacher expecting some kind of smirk or mockery, but the Sanin's gaze caught him off guard. Most of the time, the paint on Jiraya's face looked like a kabuki character. When Naruto had first asked, the pervert had insisted it was war paint. Naruto had fallen over himself laughing. As the Sanin stood amidst the rising pillars of smoke and flame, Naruto had a different opinion. It looked a lot like war paint, now. He swallowed. What should we do? Save everyone. Jiraya's answer was immediate. Naruto felt the words rattle his bones. A spark flaring like a matchstick. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to accomplish that by planning our moves and striking when the moment is right. Jiraiya took a step, bending low to grab the dropped kunai and extended it handle first to his student. I need you to trust me, and do everything I tell you to. Jiraiya said, his voice lowered. I know how you've been with your team and with Kakashi, but you're with me now. You're my student, and when we're on a mission you do everything I say, when I say, and how I say. The blonde hesitated, panic and worry and hope battling in a storm across his features. Jiraya's frame seemed to tower, white hair blowing in the wind enough to block the horizon from view. You do that, Naruto. The sage's voice dropped, but to Naruto it seemed to boom through his ears. You do that and we save everyone. Naruto's hand hovered, twitching just short of accepting the blade. A kindle to a flame. You promise? Jiraya's eyes didn't waver as he shook his head. We're ninja, kid, he replied. We don't promise things. We don't wish or hope or pray. Jiraiya pushed the blade forward, forcing the blonde's fingers to grip the handle, of ice. We plan. We execute. We don't fail. So long as there are those to protect, we will protect them. No prayers. No promises. It's how things are going to be. A flame into a wildfire. Naruto's knuckles flushed white as they gripped so tightly around the Hiraishin kunai. What do you want me to do? Jiraiya almost smiled, but the sound of an explosion cut it into a stern but pleased nod. School starts now. Phase 1 of any fight is intelligence. It's the key to every battle, and fighting without it is like fighting alone. Jiraya's hand swept into the distance, the sound of cracking trees and fire jutsu erupting from south of the arena. We need to understand what we're up against, he said, crouching to the ground on a knee and encouraging Naruto to stand beside him. Tell me everything you know about the kid. Naruto's eyes crinkled as he followed his teacher's gaze to the rising plume of smoke in the distance. Sasuke. No, no, Jiraiya snapped, shaking his head. The Jinchuriki. It was that word. The way it hit the air, like putting a searing iron to supple skin. Naruto's gaze darkened, and his eyes wandered back to the source of the pressure. Gaara, he said. His name's Gaara. He's from the hidden sand village. How does he fight? He's got this sand and it just moves. Naruto answered, scrunching his face as he searched for the way to describe the ability. He doesn't jump or use hand signs or anything. He fought Bushy Brow's kid and put him in the hospital. Naruto swallowed. And I don't think he moved a muscle. A bloodline, Jiraiya concluded. Or something from the beast. Either way, unique to him. Whatever it is, it's powerful. It took down people in the forest like it was nothing. Naruto added. The forest of death was a scary enough endeavor, but Naruto could still hear the distant screams and rumble of sand that whispered through the trees. He shivered. Shaking off the memory of the forest, Naruto pushed memory of the preliminaries to his mind. I think he thinks it's basically invincible. When Bushy Brows actually managed to almost hit him, he looked really freaked out. Jiraiya tilted his head. Freaked out? Yeah. Naruto nodded. Like eyes went real crazy and his teammates got super upset. It was weird. If this information was valuable to Jiraiya, the sage didn't say. He just made a soft to himself and turned to the battlefield for a moment. Did you ever talk to him? Naruto shook his head. Not really. He talked to Sasuke, but we didn't really speak. Damn. Jiraiya cursed. I wish we understood his mental state. He's lonely. Naruto answered, but his voice sounded it was coming from another room, another place. He's got 2 siblings, a brother and a sister, but I don't they like him. Well, not like, I think they're just afraid of him. Jiraiya's eyes shifted, but he said nothing. Naruto continued. Yeah, no, he said. I think they care about him, they're just scared. They didn't look at him like other people look at him. Like people look at me. There was another explosion in the distance, but that didn't create the sinking feeling in Jiraiya's chest. I thought you said you didn't talk to him. Naruto turned, and met his teacher's gaze with a long, even glance. I just know. Something rumbled in Jiraiya's gut and he felt his fingers clench into a fist. He exhaled, and his hand released. If he's letting the beast out, that's a problem. Jiraiya said after some pause. He's not going to recognize anyone, friends, foe, or family. I find it hard to believe his siblings would knowingly want that, if they're as you say. A second explosion, loud and on the far side of the city. A pillar of smoke erupted, and the screech of a monstrous creature could be heard. The explosion was enough to rattle Naruto from his thoughts, and the boy found his knees shaking as he witnessed the destruction from on high. It's a 2-pronged attack. Jiraiya's voice was almost foreign. How business it was. Such an abrupt change from the usual humor that filled his lungs. Let the beast run wild as an invading army storms the gates. He cursed and spit, a deep anger seeping into his blood and fists. The finals were just a distraction. Jiraiya's voice was distant like the pillars of smoke. Ashy, too. Naruto's eyes swapped between his mentor and his village and he wouldn't tell which looked more broken. Okay. Jiraiya said, inhaling deeply and shifting down to one knee. If it's a 2-pronged attack, we meet with a 2-pronged counter. Naruto nodded, crouching as his teacher sketched an outline of the city into the dirt at their feet. The Jinchuriki. Gaara. Jiraiya swallowed, but nodded. Right. Gaara. He continued. If his seal is cracking, he's the most immediate threat to the village. Neutralizing him is critical. Naruto nodded in understanding as Jiraiya reached behind him and pulled out a single piece of paper. A dull, tan sheet etched with webs and spirals of ink that glimmered in the sun. As Naruto accepted the paper, his hands tingled as a numbness wrapped his digits. What's this? He asked. It's a 5-point chakra sealing matrix. Jiraiya explained. We need to get that seal planted somewhere on Gaara's body, arm, stomach, leg, doesn't matter as long as the whole seal sticks. What's it going to do? 5th degree chakra block, Jiraiya stated, hesitating at the concerted furrow of Naruto's brow. He clarified. It's going to block all his chakra, Biju or otherwise. Naruto blinked, and the paper felt like it weighed a lot more than the parchment in his hand. And you just have this on you? He questioned. Jiraiya gave a small smirk. The Aikibi isn't the Jinchuriki I was worried about using it on, but yes, a ninja is always prepared. He answered. Naruto swallowed. The paper felt a lot heavier. So I come with you and help you put it on him? Naruto asked. Jiraiya shook his head. I'm giving you this.